All right, welcome everybody to Solidarity Lowell's March General Meeting. It is March 27th, and just as a heads up, the meeting is being recorded. If you do not want to be on the recording, feel free to turn off your camera, change your name, any of those types of things. All right, so guidelines for our virtual meetings. Again, this will be put on YouTube. Use raise hand or type an asterisk into the chat if you want to speak. The stacker for this meeting, that's Amy Baranowski, will pay attention to the order and call you in turn. Timekeeper is also Amy, so please be mindful of time limits. Use stop video if you need to take a break. Start the video when you're ready to return. Step up and step back. So if you're speaking a lot, step back. If you've been quiet, please step up. We love to hear everybody. And please speak slowly. That is for the ability for the transcript to be more accurate. Agenda 5:30-ish, brief attendee intros. 5:40, we'll have Solidarity Lowell intro, news, and committee updates. Then we'll have allied organization updates. And then at 6 o'clock, we will have Jonathan Cohen from Progressive Mass speak, and he will be our speaker for the meeting. And then we will have wrap up and next meeting. All right, the social distanced hour, quarter hour. Introduce yourself. Moderator will call on you for ease, so that's me. So I shall start. Again, I'm Caroline. Pronouns are she and her. I live in Centerville, and my least favorite food is cooked green beans. I prefer them raw. Chris, are you ready?
I can be. I'm Chris Offerman. I live downtown. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And my least favorite food is creamed spinach. I like it any other way, but not if it's in a soupy consistency.
Amy?
Hey, frantically texting. Okay. Amy Baranowski, she, her, hers. I live downtown. You know, I've been thinking about this for like a week. I mean, there's a lot of foods I choose not to eat. But I think I probably got to go with what always amuses my husband, which is that I jokingly called raisins soulless grapes. I don't actually dislike raisins that much, but for comedy value, that's what I'll go with.
Great. Wynn?
Hi, my name is Wynn Flint. I live on Christian Hill in Lowell. My pronouns are she and her. My least favorite food would be liver, because when I was a kid back in the dark ages, one of the things, if you were malnourished, they force fed you liver. So I won't even go to a restaurant that has it on the menu.
Oh my. Joe?
Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Boyle. I live in the Lowell Highlands, he, him. I guess my least favorite food is sauerkraut. My wife likes to make hot dogs and sauerkraut, and it just will chase me right out of the house. Let's see.
John Grossman?
Hi, hi, John Grossman, he, him. I live in Pawtuckaville on the banks of the mighty Merrimack. Unfortunately, I really don't have a least favorite food, which is kind of a problem for me, but if I did have one, it would be radishes. I'll pass it to Mary.
Hi, everybody. Mary Tara Shive. I'm actually technically right now in Tewksbury, but I usually was living in Lower Highlands and the Acre before that. And I am not a big fan of zucchini, but I will still eat it because it's good for me. Who hasn't gone yet? How about Zoe? I see Zoe on.
Thanks, Mary. Hi, everyone. My name is Zosniku. I live on 3rd Street in Centerville area. So I'm kind of like John in where like I don't have a lot of least favorite foods. I love food. I'm a foodie, but there is one like I don't like cabbage. I just do not like it at all. So that's it. So I usually have the corned beef, but I never have the cabbage. So, anybody else that hasn't gone yet?
Yeah. Thank you. So I will go to D.
Sorry, I had trouble finding me on mute. D Halzak, she, her, I live in the acre. My least favorite food is tripe. Who else hasn't gone?
Teresa?
Okay,
I'm Teresa English, she, her. I live in Billerica, and my least favorite food is artichokes.
Paul?
Paul Gadet in Highlands of Lowell. Pronouns are he, his, him. Least favorite food, I guess, would be horseradish.
I'm learning so much. All right. Linda, are you available?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Linda Vieira from Acton, she, her, hers. And I have so many least favorite foods, but we're going to go with cottage cheese. I have a lot of favorite foods.
Wonderful. Linda Cantor, are you available?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
My name is Linda. My pronouns are she, her. I live in downtown, and my least favorite food is oatmeal or any type of cooked cereal, except for grits.
Huh. All right. John Cohen? All right, we'll switch. Susie, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone. My name is Susie Chun. My pronouns are she, hers, and where I live is in South Lowell. My least favorite food, I'd say any internal organs, like tripe and stuff. So I don't like any of those stuff. So gizzard. So those are my least favorite things. But other than that, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, so who has just joined us with the phone number?
I am trying. This is Livenia Furusa.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. All right, so we'll catch up to speed. We're doing the social distance hour, so name, pronouns, where you live, and least favorite food.
My name is Livenia Furusa. I live in Lowell, Massachusetts. And I don't like peanuts.
Great. I think that's everybody. Amy, am I right? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. I finally figured out this Zoom view where I can see people. All right. What is Solidarity Lowell? Solidarity Lowell is a volunteer-based group of community members of Greater Lowell working towards social justice by defending the human rights, dignity, and equality of all persons against hate and discrimination. We welcome new members and we welcome the new folks we have today. The Solidarity Lowell Coordinating Committee is your elected team of volunteers running the meetings, organizing events, disseminating relevant news, and sharing calls to action. Elections are held every April. And I'll just pause for a moment and have everybody who's on the coordinating committee that's here just wave and smile. So we all know who we are. Thank you. Progressive Massachusetts. Solidarity Lowell is a chapter of Progressive Massachusetts, otherwise known as Progressive Mass, and it is a statewide member-driven grassroots organization committed to fighting for a vision of shared prosperity, racial and social justice, good government, and environmental sustainability in Massachusetts. Visit progressivemass.com or contact us after the meeting to learn more. And Jonathan Cohn from PM will be speaking today on statewide issues affecting Lowell and local endorsement best practices, and that'll be a little bit later. So celebrate victories. So the Massachusetts House of Representatives passed the Crown Act to prohibit hair discrimination. Yay, natural hair, I love it. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu announced the creation of a new Office of LGBTQ+ advancement. That's awesome. Shalanda Young became the first woman of color to head the Office of Management and Budget. And the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services agreed to restore a path to permanent residency for many temporary protected status beneficiaries. Who else has victories they'd like to share?
Caroline, did we do the driver's licenses last meeting? The House victory?
We did, but we can say it again.
So it's now in the Senate and expected to get passed, and the vote in the House was enough to override the veto expected by the governor. This is for
Wonderful.
driver's
Thank
licenses.
you.
Yeah.
Woo woo. Okay, anybody else? All right, so I will add in a quick one from Friday night. There was a couple of us there at the chili cook-off, which was awesome and super, super well attended by DIY Lowell. And Mary was a huge part of that. And I will, one of the awards was given to Jack Moynihan as Volunteer of the Year. And I will put in a little bit more about why later when we get to group and allied updates. I wanted to highlight that one. All good. Dee, are you ready to do this? Elections? Can't hear you.
I can't see the screen, so.
I can read it.
Okay.
So the elections subcommittee, the committee will be considering the best way to handle endorsements moving forward. And if you'd like to be part of this discussion, please contact Lisa at solidaritylowell.com after May, or D. Halzak, d@solidaritylowell.com today and forward. This has to do with all the levels of endorsement that will be happening or potentially happening this year, which John will also speak to further down the road. So this is the time in the meeting for allied group updates and announcements. Please share any important information and upcoming events from other groups that you are involved in. When I see a hand.
Hi, I'd like to give an update on the Unpacking Whiteness workshop. This coming week will be our 4th class or session. It's a 2-hour session with Lyra, the adult learners at UMass Lowell. And when we started it, it was definitely, we're doing this. I'm part of Lyra, but I was saying this is from Solidarity. So I don't know if that's gotten into their brain yet, but anyway. So it's been six older white people. I was concerned about we were going to have too many men who can dominate stuff, but that worked out fine. And it's 4 sessions. The first session is about white privilege. The second one is a lot of the history. The third one is more myths, like how really the revolution came about and what have you. And then this is a real lively one. The 4th one and last one is going to be reparations. I'm just really excited because at first folks were real polite. You know, they were like, didn't feel comfortable 100% with each other. They could be real. But you know, after the first session and they saw me, they said, oh, we can be real. So anyway, so I knew we had reached a good place when very politely, they started to argue with me. And that may seem like a weird thing to be happy about, but it meant that they were really comfortable and they're really saying what's on their heart, and they're really open to learning. Like they were
Mhm.
just sort of processing out loud, and it just made me so happy. So it's going well.
That's great. Thank you. Linda, I see a hand.
Yeah, and you can tell me if this is the right time to talk about this. I'm on Team Tammy Govea, and I had been talking to Dee about possibly having a signature collection event in Lowell. So if this is the time to talk about it, I'd be glad to put that out there. So Tammy's from Lowell, and we would try to get her to be on the kickoff. It could be a Saturday morning, afternoon, meet at a coffee shop, go out and collect signatures, come back, have happy hour, dinner, whatever. So I'm completely open to whatever the group would like to do. I'm in charge of the signature collecting papers for Tammy. So if anybody's interested in doing this, then I don't know if this is the time to work out the details, or if you want to just say, yes, I'd like to do this, or no, that's a terrible idea. Just let me know what you would like, how would you like to proceed?
Okay, so typically in this setting, this is just updates. And so what I'll do is to the general group, if you're interested in that, put a message into the chat. That's the best way to do it. And then Linda, what we'll also do is put your contact information into our notes. So then if somebody that's not here down the road reads it, what is the best way to contact you? Email?
I can put both in the chat, email, phone.
That would be
text,
perfect.
Whatever.
Great, because that'll also go into the minutes. So
okay,
wonderful. All right. Does anybody else have any updates?
Mary, did you want to elaborate what you put in the chat?
Yeah, I have a couple if others don't. So Shop Dinner, which was happening before the pandemic by Coalition for a Better Acre, is starting up again, and they're meeting. So they always do the last Wednesday of every month at the Senior Center. So very exciting for that to be able to happen for those that are ready to be in person in that way. You can find the information on Facebook if you look up Coalition for a Better Acre. And I know that LEJA, the Lowell Education Justice Alliance, is having a forum around the situation with the schools on April 5th. And then Lowell Votes will also be having a public meeting later in April, so we'll share that information as soon as we can.
Could you tell us what CHOP is?
Yeah, it's mostly a kind of community gathering event for residents, especially of the Acre neighborhood, but it's open to everybody in Lowell. They do a different theme each month and have some community partners, presenters, or otherwise community dialogue around different topics. And there is free food. It's like a community dinner together. Yeah.
Great. So, and since I don't see Jack here, another piece that he asked is that we speak about the Lowell Litter Crew, which was one of the many things that was highlighted for Jack and his award on Friday. You'll find that information on Facebook. They are looking for volunteers and ideas. So please look for them online on Facebook. That's the best place to send them information if you would like to volunteer or if you have ideas about things that they can do within the community. Joe, I saw your hand.
Yes, I was going to announce the CHOP dinner. Thank you, Mary. The other thing that's coming up is on April 4th, the Lowell Democratic City Committee is having its reorganizational meeting to reorganize the ward committees into matching the city council districts, basically. That is Monday, April 4th at 7 o'clock. It says at the East End Social Club where they used to have the meetings back before Corona. So I guess they're having this one live and in person again.
Great. Does anybody have any other updates? All right. So now it is time for our speaker, and let me see if John is here. Oh, I see. Oh,
Yes,
there we go. Wonderful. All right.
I might need to be arranged by tweak my video angle a little bit. I need to see what I actually. Okay.
Good.
Sorry, I'm on my phone right now, so my video angle is a little bit off. But how have you all been? Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Like, should I go ahead? Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me this evening, and for all of you for being here. I know many of you already. Jonathan Cohn, policy director for Progressive Mass, was the have been the chair of our issues committee and elections committee for a few years now, and was going to talk about general kind of what this year looks like when it comes to elections as kind of like a macro perspective. And then I'll probably tag in a few different policy and ballot initiative stuff as well, considering that like with the ballot initiatives also kind of appearing on the November ballot as well. Kind of with some general stuff with Progressive Mass, we started our statewide endorsement processes back in the beginning of the year when we sent out, or technically at the end of last year when we sent out candidate questionnaires for the gubernatorial and lieutenant gubernatorial candidates. And then for those of you who joined us for our annual meeting back in January, conducted interviews with gubernatorial and lieutenant gubernatorial candidates, which were a kind of fun back-to-back string of candidates. And as I think was noted in the chat, when we polled membership in February, kind of both Sonia Chang Diaz and Tammy Govea each got approximately 78% of the vote in our member votes for the governor and lieutenant governor's race. And if you're a dues-paying member of Progressive Mass, make sure to check your email, because our endorsement vote for Attorney General, Auditor, and Secretary of the Commonwealth, they're all now open. We've gotten questionnaires back for the Attorney General's race, kind of Andrea Campbell, Shannon Liss Riordan, and Quentin Palfrey. For Auditor, Chris Dempsey and Diana DeZaglio. And for Secretary of the Commonwealth, Tanisha Sullivan. Bill Galvin did not send us a questionnaire, which was also the case back in 2018. I'm not particularly surprised, but it would still be interesting to see him go on the record on stuff, especially because of places where he has resisted in implementing election laws, and would be interesting for him to actually have to answer questions about that. Kind of like two things, just kind of to give a quick shout out to the Votes Act that's kind of making its way through the legislature right now. The one thing that Galvin was required to do that he still hasn't done yet is back in the 2018 automatic voter registration bill, there was a provision to enroll Massachusetts in the statewide consortium called ERIC, which I believe is the Electronic Registration Information Center. And it's a partnership of states, kind of a mix of both blue states and red states, that was started by the Pew Charitable Trusts to kind of improve the voter rolls in states. So to have kind of high security, high privacy, kind of high data accuracy matching, so that if somebody moves from one state to another, you can take them off take them off where they left and send them a letter in where they are now and say, hey, can you register to vote here in your new state? And you make so that voter registration, as close as can happen without a federal mandate, follows people as they move. That was a requirement passed in 2018, and we are still not in that because Galvin has not done that and has also chosen not to properly implement the other parts of the automatic voter registration bill, which was designed to be an opt-out system, right? Because with opt-out systems, if you want people to do something, you want to ask them to opt out rather than opt in, because if you ask people whether or not they want to register, people will start thinking of all of the possible reasons not to, rather than establishing an opt-out system that defaults people to it and then puts the burden on ushering. But the questionnaires are all live on our website. If you go to the blog on the progressivemass.com website, it's the most recent thing. You can see the candidate questionnaires there. And you should, if you've donated just like $5 over the past year to Progressive Mass, you probably would see in an email from yesterday about the poll. And we did candidate interviews yesterday as well. If you weren't able to make it, they are live on our Facebook page. They're on our Facebook page because we did kind of stream them live, and we'll also be putting them up on YouTube soon. And they're all interesting conversations. And so the one thing that's especially going to be interesting in Lowell, because you might, especially with not only the one kind of primary challenge, but the fact that you might have an open seat in Lowell. Again, I was thinking recently that like Lowell's just had a series of years of active election years. Cycles. That it'll be a really interesting year, especially when it comes to legislative stuff this year. I was talking with somebody recently about how some really strong progressive voices in the legislature will be leaving, right? With kind of thinking, especially in the House, with let's say like Tammy Gouveia running for lieutenant governor, or the fact that like both Nika Alligator and Liz Miranda in Boston are running for that Senate seat, or Maria Robinson going to DC. And so it's important that we have solid people, both replacing incumbents who aren't doing the work, as well as any open seats that may exist. To talk a little bit about the process, kind of at the state level for Progressive Mass. One, if anybody here wants to be a part of the elections committee for Progressive Mass, we'll be updating our candidate questionnaire for the legislative races. I believe it's what date would that be? I believe it's April 10th. And so if you're interested, just shoot me an email at elections@progressivemass.com. We have a notoriously long candidate questionnaire, but it makes it interesting reading. It always does make me feel good when candidates say that they learn a lot from the process. And what I always tell people, especially because it's Progressive Mass, we have one of the only public candidate questionnaires in the state, since many questionnaires operate on an internal basis. And when you have kind of robust questionnaires like that and make them kind of available to the public, you can do the work of educating candidates about what an office can and should do, and about issues that matter. You can educate the public about different policy areas and about how candidates are different. And you can also educate the media, because it creates an opportunity as well to help shape the media coverage of a race, because you've gotten people on record in a way that is available, that creates something that, for insofar as there is local journalism, unfortunately, has that opportunity to talk about what are the issues that divide candidates and the approaches that divide candidates. So that's always been really interesting. And so we do welcome folks who, in case anybody kind of wants to join. Yes, I'll say shout out to Lowell Votes, as it's Mary and chat, who I know has done really good kind of voter education work as well. Like, I know, especially with last year in Lowell, where that was especially vital, when you had the total overhaul of how the city council operates. And there's just a lot of basic voter education work necessary for that. So that's going to talk about a little bit on the Progressive Mass level. We'll be sending out that questionnaire kind of starting in mid-April. So if you're for Solidarity Lowell, if you're doing your own endorsements, what we always love is for chapters to do things before we do, in terms of taking endorsement votes. If chapters want to take endorsement votes, and since you have two interesting race, one interesting race and one that will probably become an interesting race. One, like Tom Golden gets a job that it seems like he's already gotten. It is fascinating to me about how we now have a pipeline of State House to Lowell City Manager, or like conservative legislator on Beacon Hill to Lowell City Manager is now a pipeline. But that'll be a kind of a really interesting kind of opportunity. One thing I know that some chapters have done in the past, and I don't occasionally, like, there end up being certain, like, if you want to take the questionnaire that we have and adapt it for Lowell, that's something we would love it for you to be the one kind of taking the lead on that process, and we'd be happy to send that to you, and especially if there are specific issues that are salient in the city or in the Merrimack Valley that are important to get candidates on record on, beyond something that is just kind of written for like races around the state. Since you often do have, there can often be hot button issues locally, or specifically salient things regionally that will be important, will highlight key contrasts to candidates. And that's one thing. For us, it's always exciting when chapters do get involved in races, and always important when we learn which candidates. I'm happy to see in the chat. Mary, if you have a question, happy to take them as they come. I'm flexible.
I would just add too, since you brought up the whole local city manager situation here, the interview of Tom Golden is going to be public on Wednesday this week, so residents are able to come or watch in person or live that process continue to unfold. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah.
And then also just like a plug from Lowell Votes being, the nonpartisan local civic education engagement and more around like rapid response and accountability on local issues, which I hope there will be future conversations about here. But there is also a questionnaire through the Massachusetts voter table, which I put in the chat for the candidates as well at the state level.
Nice. Yeah, and the voter table does do good work, and we often are in a number of kind of coalitions with them. Yeah. Shout out to them. They really do great work. And yeah, because in terms of engaging, obviously both with the I know like the one primary, like overall, like I think the two longer serving incumbents on the Lowell delegation tend not to fare well on our scorecard, as I will say, especially thinking back to 2020 during the police reform debates, and Ratty Mom and Tom Golden were not champions of police accountability. Somewhat modestly, that that is a good opportunity to have to really push. Yeah, exactly. Or voting rights, frankly, as Mary well said, that we did have, and that's something that's still live. And so I would use that opportunity as well to insofar as there is like any response. Like actually, Tom Golden probably won't even be there when they vote on the Votes Act finally. It is still good to put pressure on legislators about including election day registration in the final bill, at least so that they know that people are paying attention to what they do. Is one thing. As I generally say, that like even when legislators might not be movable on an issue, making their life less easy for taking the wrong decisions still has value, since they should at least have an awareness that their life will be made at least somewhat more inconvenient when they do the wrong thing, whether that is just hearing from constituents or that means actually having a challenger. Of the different kind of levels of how inconvenient your life can be made for doing the wrong thing. But yeah, and it's important as well to put a lot of push on it. Like Ed Kennedy has been good on that for the Votes Act, but making sure that he hears that people want the Senate to be pushing to include that, I think, is also an important thing to do, so that even those who are supporters of something, and like Vanna Howard was also a supporter of election day registration in the House, to know that people want them to actually push, and to know that their constituents are paying attention to an issue and want something to happen. In terms of, again, with like general stuff with elections, the way that we've often operated in Progressive Mass is that if our chapters take the lead on endorsements, we tend to refer any recommendations upward when we do our endorsement votes, and we've done that. I know have done that in the past, back with JP Progressives and with Progressive West Roxbury Roslindale, when there were races in the kind of going on there. We like to be able to amplify the good work being done by chapters. And like a few general points with like chapters and kind of an election involvement. I think it's always like questionnaires are always good. As I noted, that one thing in terms of like general election stuff, that is one thing that we always just kind of remind people of. If you decide to do any type of like direct involvement with a campaign and want to spend money on that, money spent needs to be somehow reported, and that's just the main rule with OCPF. So whether that, like when chapters do let's say lit pieces, whether it's just handing out flyers or even if it's to the level of like doing a mailing, as long as it's reported, that's fine. And basically that can just be an in-kind contribution to a candidate from somebody. And it's just something, especially in cases if you are running against an incumbent, it is good to make sure the boxes are all checked. Or running against any candidate who is less savory. So that's something always good. One thing also, when it comes to election stuff, Progressive Massachusetts does also have a PAC. It is legally separate from the C4 main organization. But if you end up having if there are ways in which the PAC can be helpful locally, I would just recommend connecting with Zelda McGregor is the figurehead of our PAC. Zelda or Matt McCloskey, who is from West Roxbury Rosendale, who's the treasurer for the PAC. Back in 2020, we used the PAC that we had created as a fiscal, which I was then treasurer of the PAC, used it as a fiscal agent for the efforts in Boston for the Ward 1 and Ward 18 Democratic Town Committees, where they ran competing slates to kind of fairly old guard slates that had been around forever and had been kind of mayorally controlled and quite conservative and closed. And they ran actually like on the 2020 presidential primary ballot when committees get voted on, ran competing slates. And we were able to use the PAC as a fiscal agent. And it kind of exists for that purposes. So if there is any kind of, if it can be helpful for local election work, reach out to Zelda and Matt on that, because it's, if it exists, things that exist should be used. And I will say that I've kind of, and especially interesting. I would love, and one thing I would say as well with like election stuff in Kevin Lowell this year, would love to hear from folks as the race for Tom Golden's seat ends up shaping up about who's running for that. I know recently one woman who I believe I'm blanking out of her name, but who's an aide to Ed Kennedy, recently, recently kind of created an OCPF account. And I heard that, oh, she's here. Welcome. I can't see the names because I'm on my phone, so welcome. And so that'll be an interesting, it'll be an interesting year. I think especially, I don't know if like, depending on who all the candidates are, if Solidarity Lowell is able to do a candidate forum, whether even like by their own or partnering with Lowell Votes or other groups, I think they end up being really good opportunities to increase the number of people who pay attention, who are paying attention, who understand the differences between races, between the different candidates, as well as give some media attention to that as well, because it's something, if you can give like a place like the Lowell Sun something to something to cover, even though I think like their editorial line isn't good, but their journalism can be okay. Then it's a great opportunity to do. And I know that you've done forums in the past. If I can be of any help with like forums, either forum stuff, having done a number of them myself as well, always happy to help with like forum logistics or any stuff like that, because I think that they're really interesting experiences as well. And like even if I could be helpful of live tweeting a candidate forum that you're doing, which live tweeting is something that I enjoy doing and always want more people to be doing, more than happy to help with work like that. I think those are some of the macro stuff, but there are a number of other races around the state this year, not for the Merrimack Valley, because we know since Lowell's won't be having like a contested district attorney race or governor's council race or sheriff race that I know of, although we have some of them going on elsewhere. Progressive Mass has been a part of the Justice for Massachusetts Coalition. Back in 2018, the Justice for Massachusetts Coalition had supported Rachel Rollins for the Suffolk County DA, had supported Donna Padalano for Middlesex DA, and for what's his name, John Bradley in Plymouth County. Likely that the coalition will be backing, I would assume likely that we'll be backing Ricardo Arroyo for Suffolk County DA and Rasan Hall in Plymouth County. Some of you might be aware of Rasan from his work with the ACLU, and especially with the What a Difference a DA Makes campaign back in 2018. Also, in terms of the general stuff on the ballot this year, there will be at least 2 important ballot initiatives relating to like progressive stuff. The Fair Share Amendment, folks are probably aware of. That campaign will be kind of ramping up soon, and I will let you know once it gets started. There will probably be something in Lowell or near Lowell at the end of April that I will let you know when I hear what it is. Or you may already be plugged into the regional table and find out. Since we're with the Raise Up starting to do some kind of kickoffs of like field work toward late April as that campaign kind of ramps up, knowing that, and again, as a reminder for folks about the Fair Share Amendment, the 4% additional tax on annual income in excess of $1 million, creating dedicated funding for public education and infrastructure spending. It's something that hits on 2 things. One, the need we can all clearly see around investing more in our public schools and investing kind of investing in kind of roads, bridges, and public transit. And also the fact that those at the top made bank over the past years during the pandemic, while many people were struggling, and they can definitely afford to pay for us to have better things in this Commonwealth. So that will be a very important campaign. If you haven't already signed a digital pledge card or a physical pledge card for the Fair Share Amendment, that's you can still do so. The general progressive mass one is https://raise what is it? It's raiseupma.us/PM, I believe. That's what it is. You'll find out if I'm wrong by clicking that link, but I believe that that is our link. It is also on our website. That's important. If if anybody here had done any physical pledge card collection, now is the reporting and data entry time. So I will follow up on that as we're starting to actually make sure that we have all of the data from that. But that'll be an important campaign. We already know that the opposition will be spending a lot of money to defeat the Fair Share Amendment, because since the campaign is about taxing millionaires more, the thing that millionaires have is lots of money, is the money to spend against that. So I know that in the coming months, especially, there'll be like a kind of robust field operation and media operation built, especially kind of on a regional perspective. One thing now, and like, please do shoot me an email if you're interested. I've been helping with the social media for the campaign, especially to help put together. If folks are on Twitter and have ever been a part of like a DM room, basically a cultivated space for people who are kind of, if you're active on Twitter and you want to be sharing content that you've created about the Fair Share Amendment or to help amplify others, if you're interested in that, just let me know and I can add you to it. So I found that to be found them to be helpful on campaigns to connect people working in different areas to help amplify the good work folks are doing. And also one thing that will be on the ballot, unfortunately, is the Uber Lyft ballot question, to which Uber and Lyft and other kind of gig economy companies are planning to spend like a really obscene amount of money on their ballot initiative that would help make their drivers permanently classified as kind of independent contractors and lose access to certain benefits that employees would have. That Massachusetts does actually have strong laws around independent contractor status, and they're being sued. Uber Lyft have been sued for kind of violating that. It's kind of a law basically called the ABC test, which is basically a set of rules about whether or not you are clearly an employee. And if it's very clear that Uber and Lyft drivers and other gig economy kind of workers are employees of those companies, because there's a company could not exist without their employees. That they're the ones performing the fundamental service that people are purchasing, rather than like the companies take that the app is just their business, is a convenient excuse. And so that'll be an important campaign as well, especially knowing again how much money will be spent to convince people that voting yes on the kind of Uber Lyft ballot question is a good thing, and that's what drivers want. And so I know this Wednesday, the legislative equivalents of the ballot initiative have a hearing at the State House. Excuse me, I know that's in the afternoon, and I know that I don't believe there's one in Lowell. I think that the closest one to Lowell is actually Lynn, and it's a missed opportunity to have one kind of there as well. That on Wednesday afternoon, the Mass Not for Sale campaign, which is the Mass Not for Sale is the new name for the opposition, will be having some rallies on Wednesday timed with that hearing, and we'll be turning out people to make sure that the legislature doesn't seem like they're going to pass that bill, thankfully, but just to show kind of that strong opposition to what Uber and Lyft are trying to do. And there may be a few other questions on the ballot. It is unclear to me if we'll end up seeing the one about liquor stores or kind of, I think, on the ballot. And there's one on dental licensing. And I don't know enough about whether either of those will actually make the ballot, but neither of them is likely to be as expensive and hard fought of a campaign and as pivotal for major issues that we care about as those two, both for the Fair Share Amendment of having the fact that if a kind of progressive tax amendment ends up failing in Massachusetts, that sets a bad note for other states, especially implications, and the same thing if Uber and Lyft are able to pass their law here, that's a bad things for other jobs in other states if they're able to win in Massachusetts. And one thing I often think of in terms of their campaign in California back in 2020, feels like that was longer ago. Time is a blur. But is they even made fake progressive organizations to send out. I remember seeing this, but they sent out a list of endorsements of a bunch of the like progressive candidates in California, and then vote yes on Prop 22, which just shows the type of shady campaign tactics that they are willing to go to, like that they are willing to embrace, and then it speaks to the kind of the work that will be needed to done to educate voters about what these ballot initiatives actually mean. I think those are some of the main points that I have. I'll give a shout out to a few other kind of issue related stuff coming up. Oh, good question from Win. Prop 22. Prop 22 was the ballot initiative that Uber and Lyft had run in California in 2022, which was focused on that same issue as their one is here, about enshrining that independent contractor status for drivers or for other gig economy workers. That did pass on the ballot. The legislature, I forget where it stands, because the legislature passed something to like drastically change it or outright undo it. But it was a very heavily spent campaign and a very misleading campaign that they had in California, and they're likely to bring the same exact tactics here. Quick shout outs to a few kind of upcoming events that on Tuesday, and I forgive me if these are noted earlier, that the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition will be having their annual Immigrants Day at the State House. It will be a virtual event. And so if you're interested in participating, that is Tuesday at 10 a.m. to noon. And on Saturday, April 9th, the Common Start Coalition is having a rally on Boston Common and encouraging people to come from. And I know they're planning to have buses from other parts of the state about the Common Start bill, which is the kind of the bill for universal childcare and early education, to be able to create a system from like the very little ones to those kind of in their teens to have a strong kind of a robust system of childcare, as well as for the younger ones, early education. Because one thing that the pandemic has shown very clearly is we have a very weak infrastructure in this country on childcare, and it is both weak and very, very expensive. Two things that are like a horrible fusion together. And then in other things, I know that Senator Kennedy is a supporter, but reminding him that constituents are strong supporters of the Work and Family Mobility Act is important. Thinking of the MIRA lobby day, the House passed the Work and Family Mobility Act, which again, often known as the driver's license bill, is about removing immigration status as a barrier to obtaining a driver's license. That passed the House, it's in the Senate. There have been a few conservative senators who are skittish and don't want to vote on it till later in the session, until after they know that they don't have a Republican challenger. And that's a terrible logic, and having them vote on it earlier is important. And having the supporters know that their constituents think that this is something good, because positive reinforcement is also really important in politics, as well as calling out when people don't do the right thing, that they both have the right to fight. I think that covers like my main points. I wanted to tag in with general stuff, but I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have. I know in terms of, in terms of ballot initiatives, I don't know if this is happening in Lowell. I know that some folks are doing a non-binding advisory question ballot initiatives on the Medicare for All legislation on the state level, that MassCare has been organizing that in some state rep districts around the Commonwealth. And if folks are interested in that, I'd be happy to pass on more info. But yeah, happy to answer any questions that folks have.
John,
Yeah.
do you know who the public relations firms that are working the ride sharing campaign with?
So
false
comparisons? Probably all of them, as I'm.
All of them.
I know that the Dewey Square Group is working for them, which is one Democratic consultant firm. There's another Democratic.
What was the first one again, please?
Dewey Square.
Dewey. Okay.
I know the Dewey Square Group is working for them. I know there's another firm that's doing their digital work that often does Democratic campaigns. I can't remember the name of it, but I know of that because one thing with Raise Up is with Raise Up, we've been very clear. Like I represent Progressive Mass on the steering committee, and the steering committee has been very clear that we don't want Raise Up working with any of the media consultants that are also working for Uber and Lyft, because it has kind of a coalition with many labor partners and then people who are labor allies. We don't want to be giving our money to people who are also kind of working with people trying to gut labor law in the state. That's one thing as well that we've added it to our candidate questionnaire for Progressive Mass, and asking whether or not people are committing to not work for consulting firms who are working for anti-labor ballot and initiatives or legislation.
Yeah.
Because I think that that's an important thing as well to make clear to people that you should not be working with the firms that are working for Uber and Lyft. You could probably also find, as I know Dewey Square is because they've been mentioned in the Globe as working for them. If you go to OCPF, the kind of Office of Campaign and Political Finance website, and find like the Coalition for Independent Work, I believe is their name. You can look at their expenditures. I don't think that they have to report as regularly as they should, but you could probably find some additional firms on past reporting that they've had to do on their expenditures.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It was a good question.
Thank you, John. Anybody have any other questions?
John Grossman, raise his hand.
John Grossman?
Yeah. Do you see a path for victory for Sonia Chan Diaz? And if so, what is it?
So what I would say when it comes to path to victories for candidates, so like obviously in that race, Maura Healey has high name recognition and like lots of money. What I would say in terms of any race is always the candidates will win if like what any kind of underdog candidate needs is a strong field operation. It is what I would say for any campaign that is kind of viewed as an underdog, just needs to have people actively working on a campaign. What I've often said for her, like that is her campaign's ability to have a path to victory depends on her doing really well in some of the kind of progressive bastions in the Commonwealth, as well as doing really well in the gateway cities. And to be able to really forge a coalition that which you kind of gets high numbers in both of them. And so that's what I would say. The same for kind of any campaign that just needs to be the campaign itself needing to be kind of actively talking and creating and highlighting kind of contrasts that are meaningful to voters, as well as supporters having a kind of a strong grassroots operation to connect with voters. Since one line that I often say with different field side of campaigns is the number one reason why somebody doesn't vote for you is you didn't ask them. But yeah, no, I'm curious to see what happens with a number of the statewide races, as well as to see what even happens with the Democratic Party convention and like if it even happens. Like if you wonder, given that it's like a hybrid affair, and like we still don't fully know what that actually will look like in practice. I will also note as a soft heads up, if we end up having a meaningfully hybrid convention with a strong in-person component, Progressive Mass will have a table at the convention. And if you have any interest in working at our table for part of the convention, let me know. I tend to find tabling fun. Not everybody does. I tend to enjoy being able to sit at a table and just like yell at everybody I know who walks by to come over and do what I'm asking of them. I'm guessing many of you also like doing that. I often felt that having a table empowers me to ask people to do things because I'm not just a random person. I'm a random person who has a table, which conveys legitimacy. So it can be a fun opportunity.
All right,
Yes,
Win.
Win.
Jonathan, could you put your,
Uh-oh.
Sorry, I think you.
You muted yourself. There you go.
can you put your email in the chat?
Yes, yeah, I can drop. I'll drop it in the chat. It is. I'll give you. I have several emails that I respond to, but I'll drop. You can do Jonathan@progressivemass.com, which I am typing right now.
And Joe, did you have a question?
Yeah, what's the progressive mass housing push this year?
So the things that we've been most actively involved, I think the one that we've been most actively involved with on the housing front is the real estate transfer fee push, to enable cities and towns to if they want to pass kind of fees on like high-end real estate transactions to be able to create funding streams for affordable housing locally. There have been a number of cities across the state that have passed this, but it can't become law without the Commonwealth's approval. It's one thing that I often find like really striking, that we have often very restrictive home rule things, kind of home rule processes, where there'll be sometimes I always note that like sometimes you'll see in another state that there'll be like a Republican legislature trying to prevent a deep blue city from passing its own laws, but that's already the case in Massachusetts. We've been that way for a long time. And so I think that the real estate transfer fee, for its ability to actually enable often like significant things locally, is one kind of pretty broad coalition that we're a part of. It's now called the Local Option for Housing Affordability. I believe that's what it's now called, LOHA, that they recently gave themselves a new name from transfer fee coalition. I think the coalition's somewhat hopeful that like the new one from Boston will put some pressure on the state for taking action. And also we're also very supportive of the bill to kind of to lift the statewide ban on rent control and other tenant protections, called the Tenant Protection Act, from Adam Gomez in the Senate and Mike Connolly and Nika Elagardo in the House. Since I often like to describe Massachusetts as being haunted by the ghosts of ballot initiatives passed. And that's kind of one case where like it passed, it shouldn't have passed, but it only narrowly did in like 1990, I believe, or in the early 90s. And so that's been law since, preventing municipalities from taking action to pass their own laws, when we've seen in a number of cities, especially the cities that are rapidly rising rents. So like in Massachusetts, we have problems of rapidly rising rents and rapidly rising housing costs. And they both rapidly rising rents, you do need some kind of efforts of kind of rent stabilization to help combat rapidly rising housing costs. Also need certain issues around housing production to bring them down, especially in a number of the suburbs that have some of the most outrageous housing costs and also have never built like a single additional unit of housing. And then I'm gonna note, and also I'll also give a shout out to the Homes Act, particularly because it's something that has passed the legislature in the past. The Homes Act, which was written by now State Senator Lydia Edwards, but had been written for her when she was a counselor, is about eviction ceiling, which is a really important thing that's often easy to kind of forget about the importance of, is that when people get evicted, that can be on their record permanently and then harm their ability to get other housing in the future. And even when children are evicted, that can be on their record as having been evicted in the past, making future landlords skeptical of renting to them. And so the Homes Act is an important bill. It passed in which would basically allow for the sealing of those, create for the process for the sealing of those records, so that it doesn't stay with people forever, and make sure that records get sealed immediately in cases where somebody got evicted for no fault of their own, or even had to go to eviction court and didn't get evicted. And it's like just incredibly absurd to think of those cases that still goes on your record. That it had been passed by the legislature at the very end of the last session, and their kind of 13th hour economic development bill, but the governor vetoed it, and they didn't have the time to do anything to respond. But they've passed it. They've shown that there's support. So it'd be important to make sure that gets passed, especially as we're seeing a wave of evictions connected to the connected to the fallout from COVID and the removal of eviction protection statewide.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna share my screen again, 1 minute.
Thank you all for having me. And again, Jonathan at progressivemass.com would love to, if you have any questions about anything I noted, just shoot me an email.
All right. So our next meeting will be Sunday, April 24th. And the topics will be the Solidarity Lowell Coordinating Committee elections. We may have something else in there, but as of right now, that's what we're doing. And we are, at this point, if anybody feels so moved that they want to know more information or they're interested in running, please reach out to any of us. We love, mixing it up and having new people and, being in conversation about what that all means. And then as always, who will help us with reminder calls and text messages for next month's meeting? Chris, did you want to pipe up?
I can give my usual thing, although I think most of the people here, but anybody who hasn't done it before, it's really, really easy. I just write up a very brief script, send it to everybody together with a link to the list of the phone numbers. Everybody gets around 10 or so phone numbers assigned to them. No thinking required, just copy and text 10 times and you're done. So if anybody would like to help out with that, the more people, the fewer everybody has to do. Contact me, chris@solidaritylowell.com.
Great. And I think that's a wrap. So good night, everybody. Stay well, hopefully it'll be nice and warm for a walk. And we'll see you in April. Good night.
Thanks, Caroline. Good job.
Thank you.
Good night. And like I said before, I won't be here in April. So even though I'm up for re-election, oh, Paul, you're still here. You're interested in joining the coordinating committee? You're invited. You're definitely invited.
Chris, the recording. That's okay.